Welcome to another episode of Meal Prep Monday. I'm your host, Allison Schaaf, and today I'm talking about batching as freedom. So if you've been listening to this podcast, you know from time to time batching is a topic that always comes up because when it comes to meal prep and meal planning, to me, a really important topic to talk about is batching and how getting into that habit, whether it's for meals or other areas of your life, which I'll get into in this episode, it really can help to save a significant amount of time. Recently, I listened to a podcast episode by Denise Duffield Thomas. I think her podcast is Chill and Prosper. It's an entrepreneur type podcast, but she was equating batching to freedom. And I thought, wow, that's really a good topic to get back on and bring batching back as a topic here on this podcast, and talk about it from the lens of like, wow, this really is creating freedom. Before we get in any further, though, a quick reminder that if you have not tried Prep Dish, which I'll get into a little bit later, you can head to prepdish.com/MPM. That's short for Meal Prep Monday, and try it out for 2 weeks for free. Or if you just want to try out one meal plan, you can text the number 33777 and the word meal prep, all one word. Again, text the word meal prep to the phone number 33777, and we'll just send you a free week to try out right away. Okay, so let's get into the content on batching as freedom. So I am going to walk through some areas where I batch things in my life, both work and personal, I guess in hopes that, maybe you can get some inspiration and get your wheels turning. I always like doing these episodes as well because it kind of gets my mind thinking, okay, what am I doing day after day that maybe would be better off batched? But as I talk about them, I want you to really think through how batching these items can give you freedom. And to me, when I look at the word freedom, it's kind of in the context of time, right? Like when you create more time, you're creating this like kind of, sense of freedom and space for yourself and, your family. So areas where I am currently batching items. Number one, I'm just going to start off with meals, the kind of obvious one here, but whether it's using the Prep Dish meal plans, which, focus on meal prep and doing all the work, one day a week and then having your meals ready to go, that's kind of the ultimate in batching right there. But there's little ways that I do it. So I do tend to use a meal plan once a week. And then, there are other meals that it doesn't quite cover. So or like times where I do an imperfect foods order and I have a bunch of veggies that aren't necessarily correlated to a meal plan. But in that case, if I have these veggies that I know I'm going to eat over the next few days, I do chop them all at once, right? Like I pull them all out. I do it in one sitting. And, the way I like to think about that is, okay, I pull out, a thing of carrots and chop them. Maybe that takes 10 minutes, but I add on, the Brussels sprouts and the broccoli and some onions, and maybe it takes 20 minutes. But if I were to do each of those items individually, they'd probably each take about 10 minutes by the time you pull out your cutting board and, do the chopping and then wash the cutting board and, everything that's involved there. So the more you can do it together, the more efficiency you're going to create. And again, kind of looking back is like, that's creating this kind of sense of extra time in your world. Other items like sauces and marinades, I've talked on here some about doing a salad dressing and doubling or tripling the recipe and using it as a marinade. So you're really creating one item and for multiple purposes, maybe even freezing some. And just in general, anytime you're making a recipe that freezes well, whether it's a soup or, again, a marinade, muffins or frittata, anything like that you can freeze, double or even triple that recipe so that you have more. And by batching that, you are saving time. Okay, so meals, number one. Other areas where I batch. So laundry. And probably have talked about this before because I know this is something that I've been doing for a while, but my husband and I do our laundry together and we are in a cycle of once every 2 weeks. And, sometimes there'll be weeks where we have to like do an extra load, but I kind of came up with this maybe several years ago at this point and looked at my clothes and like, okay, what do I need to make this happen? Right. Because you do tend to wear the same clothes, it really helped me to evaluate the clothes I'm wearing and like what clothes I need in my closet, kind of as staples. The thing I did have to go and buy more of was socks, but I just make sure I always have, at least 14 pairs of socks. Not that hard to do. And then, you can stretch it out to the once every 2 weeks, and just a lot more efficient. I find that on the weeks, if I do end up, because when we travel or something, sometimes that routine or more like schedule, we get thrown off that schedule. So like maybe we do it 1 week and then the next week. And it's like, it really takes about the same amount of time if I'm doing 1 week of laundry versus 2. So that's a huge one where I do feel like it gives me some freedom of, right now it tends to be like my Friday morning thing. I'll kind of start that. And anyway, but it gives me freedom the Friday mornings that I'm not doing laundry to not do it. So that's one that I enjoy. Batching with work items. So with work, this is something where I'm always evaluating, okay, what am I doing? And is there a more efficient way? Is there a way I can batch these items? So podcast, that's a good one. Like I'm pulling out my mic, I'm getting into the, I don't know if mood's the right word, but, getting into the zone to record podcasts. So, right now I'm in the middle of recording kind of a month's worth of episodes. Social media, we do all those like a month at a time and then review. Newsletters at Prep Dish as well. Those are also done kind of batched all together. Other work tasks. So those are kind of more creation type things, but then also looking at specific tasks. So when I have calls, I try to keep in general, if I can, Tuesday's my big call day. So I know I already have a few calls that day. If I have other calls, I try and schedule them that day if possible. And then that way, the other days I don't have calls distracting me. And then also looking at days I need to not dress up. I put that in my notes, but, actually be presentable, especially like, if I'm going to be on video or Facebook Live, like I'm not going to do that in maybe the same outfit as, I don't know, like it's just kind of a different thing. So looking at days that I'm going to be on video or days that I'm going to go into town and then being like, okay, if I'm already, going to be on video this day, then maybe I should, schedule to do another video call on that day. So those are different work tasks, but those can also translate into, tasks that you're doing at home or in your personal life as well. Just kind of looking, what am I doing? Do you have an errand day? Do you have a day where you go out and do all your errands at once? And then another one that I do sometimes, it kind of depends, but I do try and batch my mail and not check it. Like even if I grab it every day, there's like a place in our shop where we store it. And I don't always sort through that every day. This is something, if any of you remember the 4-hour work week, which is kind of like maybe like my first introduction into batching, Tim Ferriss has the book on, do all your work and for the week in 4 hours. And one of the main ways to do that is through batching. And one of his examples is, only checking your mail once every week or two. And it's just more efficient to do it that way. I don't necessarily hold out that long, but I do sometimes do it less frequently than daily. Another place where I do this is, on Amazon deliveries, they have the option to do the Amazon delivery day, which I always do. One, I feel better about them only coming out to our house once a week versus all the time. But it also is like, this is another form of batching, depending on, if there's a week where I have multiple packages, better for them to just all come in on the same day. I open them all the same day. I break down the boxes the same day. I put everything away. So then that way it's not like, oh, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like I have packages and then, a few days later I have another package and you kind of have to go through the whole process. So that might be an area where you could batch things. And again, coming back to the thought for the episode of like, how does this create freedom? Well, again, it creates kind of this extra space and time in your week. Another thing that I batch is my emails. I'm trying not to check all the time. In fact, some weeks I try and check them every 24 hours, but if there's, just glance, make sure there's nothing that, is like a fire, which pretty much is never the case. And if that's the case, then I either respond once every day and get to the bottom of my inbox and usually at the end of the day, or sometimes some weeks, if I have a day where I'm spending more time with the boys, then I will do every other day, and that really isn't an issue. I think sometimes there's this sense of urgency of like, oh my gosh, I've got to get back to every email within, a few hours or something. And depending on your work, that's usually, and the nature of the emails, that's usually not the case. But another area where you can do this, so I do this with emails, but also text messages, especially throughout the day. Like, my phone is off right now. A lot of times when I'm working or doing focus work, I do try and keep my phone off. With kids, it can be a little trickier. If Ivan's at school, I do try and, not be completely phone off all day. But, if the kids are here, then yeah, I can have my phone off and not worry about it. So I don't respond to text messages as they come in. And in fact, sometimes if I see them come in and I know they're not urgent, and it's someone other than my husband, we usually try and, respond, but then I'll just save them, for the end of the day, maybe once the boys are down for dinner, especially if they come in like as I'm spending time with the boys. I